wherever city, whatever town he was going to end up in, God created it. So this idea of I can outrun God is just ridiculous. That's his thought. I'm going to hop on this ship and I'm going to outrun God. Okay, good luck with that, Jonah. So, as he's on the ship, notice everything was fine and good and dandy, but here's Jonah running away from God, getting on this ship, and so out of nowhere, a powerful wind starts to develop, and it turns into this violent storm. And so, what would have probably been a pretty smooth ride for the other sailors and people on the ship is now a violent storm that they're enduring because of this one person who is a Christ follower that is not following what God told them to do. Okay, so the ship is starting to break apart. The people are fearing for their lives, and so they begin to shout out for their gods. Now, of course, their God is not the true God, and so there is no hope coming for them. But they're trying to, like many unbelievers, call out to what they know, right? And so, crossing my fingers, lucky stars, universe, and all that stuff, right? Help me. Whatever's out there, help me. But yet denying the true and living God. And so they're crying out. Nothing's changing. So they decide, okay, we're going to start throwing stuff over the ship. All of this time, in verse 5, they're panicking, they're calling out to their false gods, they're throwing stuff off of the ship. Jonah is asleep. So he's sleeping, and it reminds me of the story of Jesus. So if you know in the New Testament, Jesus was doing the same thing. They were on a ship, the disciples are freaking out, and he is knocked out. He is asleep. It is not fazing him. And so it reminds me of that story, if you just want a New Testament connection to it. So he's down in the hold, he's sleeping. So the captain comes to him and it's like, okay, dude, like, how are you sleeping at a time like this? He's shouting at him, get up, pray to your God. Maybe your God will help us and spare our lives. And so then as they're all together now, they cast lots. There's different type of lots, but in this particular time, it probably was dice. And so they rolled dice or cast lots of a different fashion to figure out who offended the gods. And it lands on Jonah. Jonah is identified as the culprit, my version of the book states. And so they just begin to question him. Why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? What's your line of work? What country are you from? What's your nationality? What's your social security card? What blood type are you? So they're just like hounding him. Like, who are you? What's going on? And they need all these answers. So it is funny how Jonah responds to them. Remember, he is running away from God, who he clearly heard and gave him a clear direction, but he's running away from him in the hopes of escaping the Lord. And listen to his response to them after they ask for all of these different things. I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. So out of his own mouth, he's confessing, okay, I'm running away from the God who made everything, and somehow I was going to escape from him by being on the ship or on this boat. And so even in his disobedience, because that's really what it is, knowing what God asked him to do, he's still able to identify, like, yeah, I serve the God that made everything in the sea and the land and the heavens. That's who I am. And he notes that he actually worships the Lord. Not just that's the God I claim or the God I know. Like, I actually worship this God that I'm running from. Okay, let's continue. So then the sailors were afraid because Jonah had told them, hey, I'm running away from the Lord. And so they're terrified. And they're like, okay, why did you do this? What should we do to stop the storm? And Jonah replies, just throw me into the sea. Now, this could be taken in any way. The Bible doesn't clearly say, but I'm guessing that he probably asked to be thrown into the sea because he thought he was going to die, right? And if he died, because he's still a believer, he would still go to heaven, and he doesn't have to do what God asked him to do. Yep. So they were resistant went to this suggestion of throwing him over the boat because they saw how bad the storm was. Obviously, they didn't think he would survive either. So that was the case. They would have just thrown him over and would have been no extra dialogue or conversation. And so instead, they don't take his advice at first, and they just start trying to roll harder. They're still trying to make the best out of the situation and trying to survive. And it just becomes so hard that they decide, okay, this is not working. He's clearly running away from God. It's evident that God's hand is on this storm, and nothing that we are doing in our own efforts is working. So let's just throw this dude overboard like he told us to do. And so they prayed to God. So here we have people that just originally, whenever the ship took off, and while the ship was going, was praying to other gods. Now all of a sudden, they're about to do this thing to Jonah. They see the power that the God that Jonah is serving has, and now they're crying out to that God. So even in our disobedience, God is still saving people, using people, and displaying who he is to others. And so they finally cry out to the true living God, hey, we don't want to die for this man's sins, because clearly you are punishing him. You got this storm going because of him, but we also don't want to be held responsible for him dying as we throw him overboard. And what was so crazy to me is as soon as they throw him over, the storm stops.